All right, senior NFL writer for ESPN's Andscape, Jason Reid, joins us to talk about his new book out this week, Rise of the Black Quarterback, What It Means for America. Jason, congratulations on the book. Thanks so much for the time today.
No, guys, thank you for having me.
This is a very timely book, given everything that is going on in society and the league. And we wanted to walk through it because you really do a deep dive into what's going on. You've talked about how Black quarterbacks have gone from some of the most marginalized to some of the highest paid and biggest stars in the league. And you had a series on the year of the Black quarterback in 2019 that seems to have, the reporting kind of led to the book. Can you talk about the genesis of this book coming together?
Yeah, well, I approached my editors at ESPN before the 2019 season, and I told them I would like to spend the season looking at the emergence of Black quarterbacks in the NFL because we were going into the 100th season of the NFL, which the NFL was obviously celebrating, and it just seemed to me that there had never been more superstar Black passers in the NFL. I mean, in the game's history, and the juxtaposition of celebrating that anniversary or commemorating the 100th season, I should say. And the fact that this group that was once the most marginalized in the game, Black men who wanted to play quarterback in the NFL, how did they get to this point, I thought to myself, in 2019, where they were on the verge potentially of having their greatest season ever collectively. And as it turned out, Lamar Jackson won the league's MVP award. He became only the second second quarterback to win the award unanimously, joining Tom Brady. Patrick Mahomes won the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl MVP award. You had Kyler Murray, who was the Rookie of the Year. You had who else? Well, I mean, Russell Wilson had a great season in Seattle. Matter of fact, if any other players would have received votes in the MVP voting, it would have been Russell Wilson would have finished second. He had such a great season. And then you had Dak Prescott in Dallas, who had a phenomenal year. So as it turned out, the year of the Black quarterback in the NFL truly was that. Never before had Black quarterbacks accomplished more, been in such a position of influence in the league. And from that, it was kind of a jumping off point to doing this book. I was approached by some people who said, hey, we've been following this series and we think there's a book in it. And so as it turned out, 75 interviews or so and 88,000 words or so later, we have Rise of the Black Quarterback.
As part of what you were just talking about, at one point you referred to quarterbacks as passers. What is the relevance of how Black quarterbacks were perceived as far as passers, or what they were pigeonholed into earlier in their career as running quarterbacks?
Well, in college offenses are not historically like NFL pro style offenses. And so, you had Black quarterbacks in college who were often option quarterbacks, okay? And so the NFL game is a drop back game where you drop back and you survey the defense and you throw the ball. And for most, the reason Black men who played quarterback in college, and not all Black men who played quarterback in college were option quarterbacks, many dropped back and threw the ball. But the belief was that Black quarterbacks lacked the intelligence first and foremost to play the position, but that also they would just take off and run from the pocket because, I mean, it's crazy to say this now, but because the belief was that they weren't tough enough to stand in the pocket. They lacked the heart to face the pass rush. So the belief was, and obviously it's a very wrong-headed belief, is that Black quarterbacks would just take off and then the offense would just break down. So these team owners, these team executives simply did not want to have Black quarterbacks playing the position because they didn't think they were capable of playing the way you had to play in the pros, but also they just thought, hey, again, inferior, lack the intelligence, to read a defense, and they would not be able to lead white men. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it now that this is, it wasn't even something like this was an outlier in terms of the belief. This was just what was accepted. So yeah, it's come a long way, obviously.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you go into this in the book that the perception was they lacked the work ethic, the intelligence to comprehend the playbook, the inability to lead white men. I mean, anything that you could put on them not able to do the job seemed to have been put on them, including they should switch positions. And I'm curious because you talk to a lot of the pioneers for this book, and some people have tried to look at how the black quarterbacks have evolved to play the position. Can you talk about how the evolution you mentioned, the owners, the executives, and coaches, that seems to be where the evolution has been greater? Because a
Oh,
black
absolutely.
quarterback seems to still be doing what they're doing and we're always capable of doing, but it seems that the eyes have been open to the people leading the league, to their ability to do it.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but you're so right about that. Is that, it's like Chris Rock does this joke about the fact that it's not that Barack Obama was the first black man capable of being president. It's that enough white people changed on their end to let a black man become president. And I remember when I heard the joke, I thought about it from the perspective of what you just said. Like it's not like black quarterbacks were incapable of playing in the NFL or playing in the NFL regularly before the 1990s. It's just that the white team owners and general managers and head coaches did not want them. And what changed is that the color green finally trumped black. When the league exploded, and because of the TV revenue and because of the popularity all of a sudden, and eclipsing Major League Baseball as the #1 sport in the country, when the money exploded to the point where team owners were putting so much pressure on their coaches and their executives to win, these guys could no longer just cast aside a black quarterback because he's black. They couldn't, because they had to win to keep their jobs because the money was just so massive. So yeah, there were quarterbacks throughout the last century who could have been stars in the 50s and the 60s, but it took a change on within ownership, team ownership, and the team executives and the coaches to open up their minds enough to say, well, okay, yeah, this person's black, but I got to keep my job. So yeah, let me see now.
So it raises a question that we talk about, especially with the NFL. You've covered the NFL for a long time. The NFL seems to be very reactive compared to most other leagues. They are not proactive. And to me, that's part of the problem. What did you see with ownership and why the NFL always seems to be behind the 8 ball with regard to real issues, social issues?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Social issues divide people. I mean, we know that. And, I'm gonna jump ahead a little here to try to give the best possible answer that I can formulate in this question. Let's look at the Colin Kaepernick situation. Now, we know that where people stood on that largely fell along racial lines. Like based on polling, most black people, generally speaking, supported what Kaepernick did, those who were polled. Most white people, according to polling, generally did not support his form of protest. So when we talk about why the NFL is, and you're absolutely right on this, is kind of reluctant to get involved with this, is because the NFL is a money generating operation. Okay, the profits are just enormous. It's a multi-billion-dollar league, and anything that the NFL would get involved in that would potentially turn off its fans, and by fans I mean generally speaking white fans, is not something that team owners are interested in. Team owners are interested in keeping the butts in the seats, keeping the parking coming in, keeping the concessions coming in. They get so much money from TV, obviously, but there's a ton of money generated on game days as well at these stadiums. So, we talk about, and you're so right about this, it looks like they're late to get in. I would even submit it's just that they don't want to get in, and that they've been forced to get in at times, but it's not something that the league wants to do because they just don't want to, these team members just don't want to take a chance on offending white fans.
So do you think that also applied to why it took so long for black quarterbacks to be accepted by ownership? Was it more than just whatever preconceived notions they had, that they were concerned about their fan base and how people would react to the black quarterback?
Absolutely. I mean, it all goes in, it all dovetails here. I mean, you look at the situation where America was in the 50s and the 60s. And again, I guess I should make the distinction where white America was in the 50s and 60s. the belief was among many people that black men are just inherently inferior. So you start with that premise, and then from there, the quarterback position. Quarterback is the most important position, not just in football but in team sports. And quarterbacks are the leaders of the team. So if you start from the position that black men are inherently inferior to white men, and then why would you, if you're a team owner, put a black man in a position to lead your team that could, undoubtedly anger most of your fans? Okay, so it was the racism present with the owners, but it was also the fact that owners were reflecting what they believed their fan base wanted. So yeah, it absolutely was, and to your point, um, I don't want to mess you guys up in the sequence you wanted to go, but Marlon Briscoe was the first black starting quarterback of the modern era when he got in for the old in the Denver Broncos of the old AFL. He had a great rookie season. He sets a Broncos rookie record for touchdown passes. He finishes high in the AFL Rookie of the Year voting, and they simply take the job away from him because the team was afraid, in large part, that their white fan base would be angered moving forward with a black quarterback. They threw Marlon in the game when the starter got hurt and other guys weren't effective, and they were having a bad season. So that was one thing. But to have Marlon start a season and build a team around him, that was a bridge too far.
Yeah, they excluded him from the summer things. By the way, I appreciated the Paul Ropes at Rutgers shout out as a Rutgers grad.
Jeff, there you go.
And does not treat Rutgers kindly, so I did appreciate that. But we've sort of walked through that. We had Keyshawn Johnson on when we talked about their book, The Forgotten First, and you go through some of that in your chapters on barring them from playing, the reintegration piece, and the NFL moving. I'm curious, how did Warren Moon change things? A man who was undrafted as a black quarterback ended up being sort of the black quarterback that changed the perception, it seems, before Doug Williams really shattered it. Can you talk about the importance of Warren Moon?
Warren Moon is such a massive figure in this whole thing. You mentioned the Doug Williams performance. Doug Williams in the Super Bowl in '87, first black man to start in the Super Bowl, win the game's MVP award with this record-setting performance against the Denver Broncos, throwing touchdown passes everywhere. Black men were not supposed to be able to start in the Super Bowl, lead a team to a victory, and play, exceedingly well. That was not supposed to happen. So that was a seminal moment in changing or not even changing, I would say planting a seed that, okay, maybe these guys can do this. But Warren Moon really advanced the ball. Here's a guy who at the University of Washington, 1978, he's a senior. He's being booed by fans. He's the quarterback of the University of Washington, and he's being booed at home games. And he winds up winning the Conference Co-Player of the Year award. He leads Washington to a Rose Bowl victory, does not get drafted in the NFL. Now, that would never happen with a Co-Player of the Year quarterback who has all the measurables at a major conference. It would never happen today. But back in 1978, Warren doesn't get drafted. He goes up to Canada, proves himself in Canada, shatters records, wins championships. Finally, he gets signed as a free agent by the Houston Oilers. And after a transition period, he struggled a little bit starting out. He goes on this great run. He winds up going to 9 Pro Bowls. He finishes in the 1990 season, I believe he finished 3rd in the MVP voting. And what he does is he shows as a classic drop back passer, not a guy who's running out the pocket, as a classic drop back passer. Well, wait a minute, the Doug Williams thing, even if some owners thought, well, this is just a one-off, this will never happen again. Warren Moon showed that no, black quarterbacks really can do this on a consistent basis throughout a season and excel. So yeah, Warren moved the ball considerably. And I like to say that Doug shattered the myths, but then Warren showed that this could be a viable thing for owners to do, have black quarterbacks starting and succeeding.
So did what Warren did opened the door for the draft and opened the door for the likes, especially for this town, of people like Donovan McNabb being drafted.
Yeah, so it really is like there's a through line and a timeline. It's Doug Williams in 1987 plants the seed with that incredible Super Bowl performance. Warren Moon comes in finally, early 90s, into the mid 90s and really shows it's going to be done. And also we have Randall Cunningham. I mean, Randall Cunningham, he's this guy, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Not a football factory, not a football powerhouse by any means. He plays quarterback there. He's a quarterback. He's a punter. Very talented punter as well. And the Eagles draft him in the second round. Now, when he finally gets in there, when he finally becomes a starter, all of a sudden he does things the league has never seen before. He's this dual threat quarterback who has this cannon of an arm. But he can run for he can pass for 4,000 yards and run for 1,000 yards. The league had just never seen anything the likes of him. And one of the things I love about the Randall chapter is I talked to Carl Banks, the great former outside linebacker on those Bill Parcells Giants teams and New York Giants teams. And there was this game of Monday Night Football where, any Philadelphia football fan, I'm sure
remember it. You say it, and I remember it clear as day.
Carl Banks hit Randall Cunningham as hard as Carl Banks could hit anyone. And Randall Cunningham puts his hand on the old Veterans Stadium, that carpet, that horrible carpet they had there with all the seams in it and everything, the concrete that they had there, puts his hand on the concrete, stables himself, gets up, stabilizes himself, gets up and throws a touchdown pass. And, Carl Banks was just like, well, how did that happen? And Randall Cunningham was dubbed the ultimate weapon because of all the things he could do on the field. Now, so we see that what Doug Williams did, what Warren Moon did, and then Randall Cunningham shows that quarterbacks who are athletic and who can also throw the ball, there's a spot for them in the league now. Because when a team has the ultimate weapon, well, other teams want to look at that too. And the NFL is such a copycat league. Like when one team sees that something is working, another team is going to do it. Now, the thing about Randall and Warren Moon is for all the success they had, they didn't have playoff success. And the reality of it is in the NFL, you were judged as a quarterback. Well, you get paid in the NFL as a quarterback on two things, on what you do on third down and what you do off schedule and plays break down. But your legacy is defined by Super Bowls. So if you don't win Super Bowls, there's always going to be a knock on you as a quarterback. But in this journey of the black quarterback and this rise of the black quarterback in the NFL, Doug Williams to Warren Moon to Randall Cunningham, that really is what gets the momentum finally going. And then, that gives way. You mentioned Donovan McNabb, the 1999 NFL draft where Donovan McNabb is taken second overall. 3 black quarterbacks were taken in the first round: Donovan McNabb, Dante Culpepper, and Achilles Smith. And that was really the watershed moment, because it was like the league was acknowledging what we saw from Doug Williams. Okay, yeah, we thought maybe, well, this might just be a fluke. Then we saw Warren Moon and Randall Cunningham, and now we have to acknowledge that there is a place for these guys in this league.
And then the next step is a black quarterback being drafted number 1 in the draft with Michael Vick. Now, I'm curious, with Randall and Michael Vick, they were not your traditional pocket passers. Even though Warren Moon ran, he was a pocket passer. He was a passer. Vick and Randall, they were weapons. Can you talk about the NFL wasn't really ready to accept weapons? Even once they wanted a black quarterback, they wanted them to fit the role of the traditional quarterback in the league?
Absolutely. I mean, that's 100% true, because the NFL is a copycat league, but it's also a league that's slow to evolve. And when you talk about Randall was something the league had never seen before. But there wasn't then a rush to go out and try to duplicate that, because that's a hard thing to do. I mean, Randall had incredible arm. He was a great athlete, but he also had incredible arm strength. So it's not just like teams were going to be willing to continually gamble on, okay, can we find another guy like that, because Randall was so unique. But by the time Michael Vick came along in 2001, it was just undeniable that this guy was, he was faster than wide receivers and cornerbacks and had a cannon for an arm. And so he was going to be the number one draft pick. It was the first time a black quarterback was taken number one overall in the NFL draft. So his talent was too much to be ignored. But there was still, by the time Vic came along, a negative connotation with black men at that position who ran. Now, Michael Vick had success in Atlanta, but there was a lot of talk about, well, he doesn't read defenses very well, and he doesn't study hard enough. And now, truthfully, look, there are no sacred cows. No one is redshirting in the NFL. Everyone is open to criticism. The scoreboard dictates that.
But he never had a study clause in his contract.
He didn't, but Randall, excuse me, not Randall. Michael did come out later and say, he wishes he would have studied harder earlier. And that, and I remember when I heard that interview, I was like, okay, well, that's going to reinforce, perceptions and stereotypes. But he admitted he didn't, and that is on him. I think that the progress, and I'm going a little far afield here now, but I think the progress shows that in years past, Michael Vick saying he didn't study would have put a cloud over all black men at the position. But I think we've made progress. I know we've made progress because what Michael Vick did does not reflect on Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, whereas years past it would have still.
Okay, so that raises the question. We've now had in the last week the issues with Kyler Murray. Do you think that we've now, if the NFL and society has evolved to the point that the Kyler Murray issue and the clause that was put in his contract and now removed will not put a cloud over other black quarterbacks?
Let me answer this in two ways. First of all, I feel that the Kyler Murray situation with the independent study addendum is specific to Kyler Murray. Okay, I don't think that we should look at that and say, well, this is a reflection of how the NFL feels about black quarterbacks.
Agreed.
Now, having said that, the reality of it is this will put a cloud over Kyler Murray for the rest of his career. And people, I should say people who aren't very enlightened, will then lump all of the black quarterbacks in together, say, yeah, you see, they really don't study. I talked to Warren Moon about this the other day. Warren gave me a lot of time for the book. And, I was debating this with Warren because my thing was, look, this is specific to Kyler Murray. And by the way, it was a horrible move by the Arizona Cardinals on so many fronts. I mean,
by everybody, by his agent, by everybody involved.
By him, everybody do it.
Yeah, the agent should have made sure that was out of the final paperwork. And let me just backpedal here for a second. The only way you can read that independent study addendum is that someone high up enough in the Cardinals organization, or multiple people high up enough, who had the stature within the organization to have influence over the franchise quarterback's contract, felt that Kyler Murray does not study enough. Now, the best possible spin you can put on it is that generally speaking, they were okay with his study habits and they believe in him, because you don't guarantee someone $160 million, the second biggest guarantee in the history of the game, if you're not all in on it. But maybe they felt, okay, look, he studies fine, but this guy could be one of the all-time greats, so maybe if you prod him just a little bit, but you don't put that in a contract. That's a conversation you have with him and his agent before you sign the contract. Additionally, look, and talking to quarterbacks about this, 4 hours of additional study time on your own it's
nothing.
It's such a small amount. It's like, well, if you're going to put something like that in there, which you shouldn't, it's got to be something like 12 to 15 hours a week, because 4 hours a week is nothing. The Cardinals really stepped into it here, and they messed up, and they know they messed up because they removed the clause. But back to what the original question was, it does not, in my mind, show a reflection of what the league thinks of black quarterbacks. It was a Kyler Murray specific thing, but it can have the effect of putting a cloud over all of these guys. And Patrick Mahomes addressed this and these anonymous quotes in The Athletic about him and Lamar Jackson. He said, we black quarterbacks have had to fight to get here, and we've proven that we should have been here all along. But the way we're evaluated, the language does seem still a little different than the way some other people evaluate it. So, and that's something that I just think is going to be here because, we haven't eradicated racism and coded language in the country. So I think that it's naive of us to think that we could eradicate it in the NFL. And you know, Patrick Mahomes spoke for all Black quarterbacks, past, present, and future.
I mean, they may be allowed on the field at the same time now, but they're still playing a different game at times in terms of the way that they're evaluated. And you mentioned Patrick Mahomes, and we've touched on Colin Kaepernick and social justice. This is more than a football book. So anybody who looks at it as this is about Black players getting on a football field, you're missing the larger point, in my opinion, of this. In the Patrick Mahomes chapter, you talk about just how thoughtful he is when it comes to utilizing his platform and the eye-opening he had around George Floyd. Can you explain how he realized the importance of utilizing his platform to influence social justice, but also the process he went through by deciding whether to weigh in, which was different than Colin Kaepernick and that saw a different result?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you know, Patrick Mahomes is the manifestation of what all the pioneers, the old timers thought could happen. That if Black quarterbacks, if Black men who aspired to play quarterback in the NFL were truly given an opportunity to compete, nothing handed to them, but an opportunity to compete, one of them would eventually become the best one in the game. And if you remember, Patrick Mahomes burst onto the scene in his first year as a starter. It was his second year overall. Those 50 touchdown passes electrifies the whole league with his style of play. He's not a guy who's going to take off from the pocket as a practice to run, but he can do it. But it's his, he has no look throws. He's so innovative in his style of play, and he electrifies the league, wins the league MVP award. Then the next year, the Chiefs, who hadn't won a Super Bowl in 50 years, he leads them to a Super Bowl victory, and he wins the Super Bowl MVP award, becoming the youngest player then at 24 to have a league MVP award, a Super Bowl trophy, and a Super Bowl MVP award. Going into that offseason after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, there was no question. Patrick Mahomes was the number one player in the NFL. Okay, I mean, no general manager would argue that with you. And what happens is he sees George Floyd, the man's life being extinguished on TV. And, he's in this position of incredible power, okay? As the number one player in the NFL, your platform is bigger than any other player in any other sport in the country. Your platform is bigger than most politicians. I mean, you have a global platform when you are the guy in the NFL. And he went through this process of determining what he wanted to do about this thing that affected him so deeply. And, the calculus for him, it was beyond just, okay, this is wrong and I'm going to speak out. He had to think about it in terms of, because of his standing, because of the corporate sponsorship opportunities, the pitchman opportunities he had, the fact that he was a quarterback of a team in Kansas City, and we know that there are a lot of people whose views were not receptive to what Colin Kaepernick did, and he has a brand. When you were the number one player in the NFL, all NFL players have a brand. I mean, especially starters. But Patrick Mahomes had the biggest brand at that time. And he went through this very thoughtful process of, okay, his dad, Pat Mahomes, was a major league reliever for several years, Major League Baseball pitcher. So he's the son of a Black man and a white woman. His mom is white. And he has thought about these things. During the Super Bowl, there was this press conference where he talked about, he's a Black quarterback and he's the son of a Black man and a white mom. And, he takes pride in both of those things, but he identifies as being a Black quarterback. And he decided, after great thought and great deliberation, that his brand and all those things had to be put aside, because he had to use his platform to speak out about what he saw, which affected him so deeply. And a bunch of star Black players had gotten together. They were so angry and so moved about what happened with George Floyd that they put together a video. And in the video, Patrick agreed to participate in the video, which was a really big thing because everybody understood his stature at the time. And Patrick agreed to participate in the video. And in the video, he said, "Black Lives Matter." Now, we're in 2022 right now, and I don't know if people remember, but like the NFL wanted nothing to do with saying Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter movement, many white people, again, based on polling and newspaper accounts, are were did not were not happy about that movement, okay, and the things that they thought that that movement represented. And the league, no one in the league office at that point was saying anything about Black Lives Matter. The Colin Kaepernick peaceful protest forced team owners to come to the table to try to get the protest to stop. And what they did was they funded social justice issues to, try to persuade the players to stop protesting. And it did stop the protest movement in terms of, widespread support among players to continue protesting. But the league still was very apprehensive about weighing in on the Black Lives Matter movement specifically. Well, Patrick Mahomes says Black Lives Matter in this video with other star players, basically calling out owners and saying, team owners, we need you to do more to partner with us in dealing with these issues that are affecting our communities. And, it was really a massive moment in league history, because Commissioner Roger Goodell was really at a fork in the road. I mean, Patrick Mahomes had such a massive platform, he's the number one player in the league. Quarterbacks are like the superstar franchise quarterbacks are the de facto partners of the owners in terms of growing the game. So Goodell really could not come out against Patrick Mahomes. And what he did was, in his video response to the players' video, Goodell basically went down their checklist and said yes, including saying Black Lives Matter. I mean, it was really just not something that anyone expected. Now, look, that doesn't mean that there's still racism in the NFL, obviously. But what Patrick Mahomes did was, after Colin Kaepernick pushed the league to a place it didn't want to go, Patrick Mahomes, in a different manner, pushed the league even further.
All right. So before we let you go, I think this is a good segue, unfortunately, for what may be your next book, which is The Rise of the Black Head Coach. We now have a situation with the NFL, with this whole Brian Flores situation, and the NFL essentially finding, even though Stephen Ross seems to think otherwise, that a owner has decided that he was going to tell his black coach, to tank games, not do his best, while meeting with his potential replacement.
A white coach.
Yeah. How has the NFL really evolved if we're still having these kinds of discussions regarding qualified head coaches being put in this position?
How much more time do we have?
As long as you've got.
Sorry.
I mean, here's the thing.
It's for your next book.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Then everybody needs to go out and buy Rise of the Black Quarterback, what it means for America, if they want to see Rise of the Black Coach, what it means for America.
Oh, we're going to
by the way, it is a great book. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys. Very kind of you. Okay, look, quarterback was once the frontier for black men in the NFL. That was the goal to get to that. We talk about the frontier about, young man go west at one point. That was the frontier for black players in the NFL to prove that they could ascend to that position and stay at that position and thrive at that position. And what that would represent about the evolution of the NFL. Well, the next frontier is coaching, because as we know, Brian Flores, the former head coach of the Miami Dolphins, who's currently a Pittsburgh Steelers assistant coach, has alleged widespread malfeasance in the hiring practices of the NFL. And he's pointed to many things within a lawsuit that he has filed and that two other black coaches have joined in on. And the NFL has 32 teams. It has 3 black head coaches. The on-field workforce of the NFL, the players, at one point a few years ago, the workforce, the on-field workforce players were 70% African American. Now the numbers are, I think, 58.7%, 58.9%. So overwhelmingly still, I mean, it's a black league. So if you have a league made up of mostly black players, but black men who want to attain the highest levels of coaching and executive positions, if they're shut out from those things, if it's mostly the domain of white males, well, what does that say about the league? And Commissioner Roger Goodell, I have to say something here, right? Because I don't want to make this sound like I'm carrying water for Goodell, but within the league office, Goodell has said that he wants the league to have a more inclusive workforce, that he's committed to diversity, and he does walk the talk in his office. Like if you look in football operations in the NFL, and I wrote a story about this in the Super Bowl, there are many Black faces, Black men and Black women who have vice president level positions, not just, mailroom people, but like real positions of power. But the problem is at the team level, and Goodell can't force owners to do the right thing, for lack of a better way to put it, at the team level. The NFL has, implemented programs. They've had programs for years designed to increase the pipeline of qualified candidates in coaching. They're doing things, to try to increase the pool of applicants for executive positions. But it's simply just ridiculous to say that at this point in 2022, there aren't enough qualified candidates for jobs. The reality of it is team owners are just not comfortable hiring Black men to lead their football teams, because quarterback is the face of a football team, but a head coach is the face of a football team as well. And when there are only 3 Black head coaches, Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Todd Bowles of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Lovie Smith of the Houston Texans, in a 32-team league, well, we know that the evidence proves that these owners just don't want Black coaches. So has the league evolved? Absolutely. Anyone who would argue otherwise is just not, is being intellectually dishonest. But has the league evolved to a point where qualified people across the board in all operations and all capacities where the NFL fills jobs have opportunities to fairly be considered and to rise up? No, the league is not there yet.
So is the real problem that ownership hasn't evolved?
Absolutely. I mean, ownership has been forced to go to places where it didn't want to go. Like the team owners had to stop the protest movement because white fans, generally speaking, were infuriated by it. And the league did that. The league put up all this money for social justice causes. And although it wasn't an implicit quid pro quo, it clearly was, look, we're going to give this to you. Will you stop protesting? And it that did happen. There were also rules that changed about what you could do on the field before games, but the main carrot was the money for the social justice issues. But at the team level, this is still a major problem, and I don't know how that changes unless, for lack of a better way to put it, owners become a little less racist,
or that there's actually minority owners as well. So you don't.
Well, let me push. And I've talked about that a lot.
Or would that solve the problem? I mean,
well, I understand in theory what you're saying, but let me go back to my Barack Obama example that I used a little earlier. Okay, can you imagine what would have happened if, when the first Black president stepped into office, he had, for all the political appointee positions and all the positions that the civil service positions that a new administration can appoint, I believe it's something like is it 2,000 jobs or something like that? I mean, it's a big number of jobs. Can you imagine if Barack Obama said, okay, I'm going to put Black people in all those positions, or I'm going to put Black people in all the highest positions?
So you think there would be a concern raised that a Black person was hiring too many Black people if they were in a leadership position, and they would have to diversify with more of a white staff within that to not have that pushback?
Exactly. Do we have a minute? I can tell you a quick anecdote.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for the book, I'm talking to a former head coach, and he was telling me about a story where he was interviewing for a job once, and the owner told him, look, I really like you. I think that you're a great candidate. You're very smart. You're very accomplished. But if I hire you, you're going to hire all Black guys. And if I were to do that in my business, well, what positions would my son and his friends eventually have? I mean, he expanded he expanded on what he was trying to say to the coach and why he wasn't going to hire him. And when I heard that, it was chilling to me. But I thought to myself, well, yeah, Public Enemy, the rap group, they had an album, Fear of a Black Planet. And there, when I heard that story, that was the first thing I thought about, that, like, okay, so this owner just assumed that he would hire all black guys, and then that created fear within the owner, because, well, if you continue along that theory of the case, then, well, if more black men rise up to positions in corporate America, well, like, my son and his friends, who by birth had had standing, well, now they won't have any jobs at all. Now, it seems crazy, but look, that's what the owner told them. So yeah, I think that while representation is important, and having a black principal owner of a team would be something significant, I don't think black people can be counted on to change the hiring landscape, because and also,
They shouldn't have to be counted on to change the hiring landscape.
right, they
Not them.
shouldn't. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They shouldn't. And the thing is, it would be wrong for a black person, in my opinion, just coming to hire all black people. We want people to hire qualified people, and for everyone to have an opportunity to compete. That's what this whole thing is about. Like, if NFL owners would just say, okay, look, these these marginalized, historically marginalized groups, there are qualified people from an educational standpoint, from an experience standpoint, like, just let me take color out of it. Like, if that happened, you would see the numbers changing. But again, that's on team owners.
Yeah, but that happens when there's people in the room that are different than you, so you can hear other people's perspectives. So having black ownership in a room when they have their annual meetings gives a perspective that these owners don't seem to have.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I just think that when you look at, the NFL has 32 teams. Let's say there's a black principal owner, and that owner says, hey, there are some things we can do differently. But these owners already know that. Like, I mean, it's not like they don't already realize, well, this is a problem. And Goodell has acknowledged it's a problem. He said, like, when they were shooting down after Flores' lawsuit, when they immediately came out and said his specific claims were without merit, in the next breath they said, yeah, but we understand we got to do better. So it's not like, so it's not like they don't realize it. And I get what you're saying. Having someone who's having a principal black owner in a room, okay, well, that person's at the table, but we're in 2022. All of these owners know where we're at. They just choose to continue doing what they do.
There's clearly more, so we have to get this book doing well for you. The book is The Rise of the Black Quarterback, What It Means for America. There's clearly a follow-up on coaches and ownership when we get you there. Jason Reid, how can people follow you and stay updated?
People can follow me at JReid ESPN on Twitter, and they can follow me at ESPN.com and Andscape.com.
Thank you so much for the time. Best of luck with the book, and we hope we get to talk to you again sometime.
Oh, anytime, fellas. I had a blast. Thanks for having me.
This was awesome. Thank you, Jason.